The inheritance meeting happened in the old family house with the wide porch and the creaky stairs. Everyone packed into the living room like it was a show. My mother sat straight on the sofa, my father stood near the fireplace, and my brother Nathan waited with a proud smile. My Uncle Robert and my Aunt Claire whispered to each other, and even Mrs. Weller from down the street stopped by, which really meant she wanted to hear the drama. My dad cleared his throat and announced that my parents were signing all 8 rental properties over to Nathan. The room burst into cheers. Hands clapped, people laughed, and my Aunt Claire called him the golden boy. I stayed quiet by the window because I already knew what the cheers meant for me. Nothing. No property, no support, not even a kind word. My mother didn't look at me once, like I wasn't worth the effort. When the noise finally settled, I stood up slowly. I didn't shout or beg. I just looked at my dad and asked one simple question, calm and clear. Dad, why are you giving Nathan anything from grandfather if Nathan isn't actually your son? The smiles froze, the cheers died, and the whole room turned cold. People think being cut off at 18 is one sharp moment, like a door slams and that's the end of it. For me, it was a door slam. Yes, but it was also the long silence afterward. The day it happened, my mother handed me a backpack like she couldn't wait to get rid of it. My father stood behind her with his arms crossed, looking at me like I was a bad choice he had finally corrected. Nathan stayed in the hallway, half hidden, watching like he was studying how to win without getting his hands dirty. I walked out with a backpack, $40, and a phone with a cracked screen. No car, no plan, no call us if you need help. Just the cold air and the feeling that I had been erased. I didn't go to a friend's house to cry. I didn't have that kind of safety net. I went wherever I could, taking the first job that didn't ask too many questions. I ended up in Europe first, not because it was glamorous, but because I followed a seasonal work offer someone mentioned in a crowded bus station. I landed in a small city where the streets were narrow and the mornings were loud with delivery trucks. The cafe that hired me was run by a tired woman named Alina who had sharp eyes and no patience for excuses. She put a cloth in my hand and said, "Tables. Floors. Fast." My first shift was chaos, spilled drinks, impatient customers, plates too hot to hold. I went home with sore arms and a few dollars in tips, and I cried into my pillow, not because the work was hard, but because I was scared of how easy it was for my family to forget me. In that same city, I rented the cheapest room I could find. The bed was narrow, the walls were thin, and the window looked out at an alley where cats fought at night. I learned to count every dollar, to plan meals like a game I could not lose. Alina taught me little things that turned into big habits. Look people in the eye, she said. Don't apologize for existing. She showed me how to keep my money safe, how to write down every expense, how to save even if it was only $5 a week. Some days she was kind in a quiet way, leaving a sandwich near my bag and pretending it wasn't for me. Some days she was tough, because she knew the world would be tougher. After a year, Europe started to feel less like a storm and more like a road. I moved again, chasing better pay and steadier hours. That's how I ended up in America later, in a city that felt bigger than my worries and louder than my thoughts. I found work in a warehouse on the night shift, the kind of job where time moves by the pallet and the beep of machines. The supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, noticed I never took breaks unless someone told me to. One night he slid a paper bag across the table and said, "Eat. You can't lift boxes on pride." Inside were 2 sandwiches and an apple. I tried to refuse, but he shook his head like he'd seen my story before. From then on, he checked on me without making it embarrassing, teaching me small tricks to work smarter and not get hurt. Life in America wasn't easy, but it was honest. If I worked, I got paid. If I showed up, I moved forward. I rented a tiny room again, saved what I could, and built routines that made me feel real. I opened a basic bank account, watched my balance like a hawk, and promised myself I would never be trapped by someone else's control again. There were weeks when I had $12 left after rent and food. There were nights when I lay awake doing math in my head, trying to stretch time the way I stretched money. Still, I kept going, because every day I survived was proof that my parents were wrong about me. The only person I missed, in a way that surprised me, was my grandfather. He had been the one adult in that house who spoke to me like my thoughts mattered. When I was younger, he would call me into his study and ask, "What do you think about the world?" Not what grades did you get, or why can't you be more like Nathan? Just what I thought. Before everything fell apart, he had pulled me aside one evening, his voice low and steady, and said, They're not looking at you the right way. I remember shrugging like it didn't hurt. They never have, I said. He nodded slowly, like he already knew. That night, he gave me a small envelope. It wasn't fancy, just plain paper with my name written neatly on the front. Keep it safe, he told me. Don't open it until you have to. I didn't understand what he meant then. I stuffed it into my backpack when I was kicked out, and over the years it became one of those objects you stop noticing because it's always there. But sometimes, when I felt lonely or scared, I would touch it through the fabric, like it was a promise I couldn't quite read yet. When I came back for the inheritance meeting in the old house, I had that same envelope with me. I didn't come back as the kid they threw out. I came back as someone who had learned how to stand alone. And as I sat by the window listening to them cheer for Nathan, my fingers found that envelope again. I could feel the paper edges, the quiet weight of it. In that moment, I realized the thing they never understood. I wasn't walking into that room to beg for a place. I was walking in with the truth, and the truth was about to crack their perfect story wide open. The will reading took place in a lawyer's office that felt too clean for the kind of mess my family carried. The chairs were stiff, the air smelled like paper and cold coffee, and the clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. My parents arrived early, dressed like they were going to a celebration instead of a serious meeting. My father wore a dark suit that made him look important, and my mother wore pearls and a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan walked in behind them with his shoulders back, like he already owned the building. My Uncle Robert and my Aunt Claire followed, whispering as if they were saving the best comments for later. The lawyer, Ms. Hart, greeted everyone with a calm face and a careful voice. She didn't seem impressed by anyone's confidence, which I appreciated. She opened a thick folder, adjusted her glasses, and began reading the first pages, dates, legal language, and long sentences that made my Aunt Claire sigh with boredom. Nathan tapped his foot like he couldn't wait to get to the good part. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, watching their faces more than I watched the paper. My mother kept glancing at me like she was measuring how easy I would be to control. Then Ms. Hart spoke the number that made the whole room lean forward. The estate is valued at $3,500,000, she said. $3,500,000 hung in the air like a bright light. My mother's smile grew wider, and my father's eyes glittered as if he was already counting what he could buy. Nathan's mouth turned into a satisfied smirk. Aunt Claire let out a small gasp, dramatic as always, and whispered, "That's incredible." Even Uncle Robert, usually quiet, sat up straighter. My father leaned toward me as if we were close, as if he hadn't watched me leave with a backpack years ago. "Of course," he murmured, soft and sweet. "We'll manage it for you." My mother nodded quickly, her voice sharp but wrapped in fake care. "You're too impulsive," she said. "We'll protect you. We'll make sure you don't waste it." Nathan didn't even bother to hide his confidence. He looked at me like I was already signing something over, like I was a child holding a toy he planned to take. Ms. Hart turned the page, and the room became quiet in a tense, excited way. My Aunt Claire clasped her hands as if she was praying for a result she already expected. Ms. Hart's voice stayed steady as she read, "My client has named the sole beneficiary of the full estate." Sole beneficiary. The words hit like a drum. My mother's fingers twitched, ready to reach for me again. My father's grin became almost proud, like he thought he had trained me to accept whatever came next. Nathan relaxed in his chair, already claiming the moment as his. Then Ms. Hart paused, looked down at the page, and spoke the name. "The full estate is to be given entirely to," she glanced up briefly, and for the first time her eyes met mine, calm and certain. "To you." For a second, the room didn't react, like the words didn't make sense to their ears. Then everything broke at once. Nathan stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "No," he said, loud and sharp. "That's wrong." My father gave a short laugh that sounded fake even to him. "There's been a mistake," he snapped, his face tightening. My mother's smile disappeared so quickly it looked like it had been wiped off. "That can't be right," she whispered, but her voice didn't sound confused. It sounded angry. Aunt Claire looked between my parents and the lawyer like she wanted someone to fix the scene for her. Ms. Hart didn't flinch. She kept reading, adding details that felt like thunder. My grandfather had made the decision clearly. He had signed it properly. He had included instructions and protections. The more she read, the more my parents' faces changed from shock to calculation. I could almost see the gears turning in their heads. They weren't thinking, "Why did he do this?" They were thinking, "How do we take it anyway?" Nathan's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and Uncle Robert stared at the floor, pale, like he had been afraid this moment would come. When we left the office, my mother walked close to me, her voice low and sweet again, the way it gets when she wants something. "We'll talk about this," she said, like it wasn't even a question. My father nodded once, a hard little movement. Nathan looked at me with hatred he didn't bother to hide. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with messages, some pretending to congratulate me, others warning me, and a few accusing me of stealing what belonged to Nathan. And while the town started whispering, my parents started planning, because they had never been good at losing. That night, I sat alone and opened the small envelope my grandfather had given me. Inside was a short letter and one simple line that made my chest tighten. "They will try to take this from you. Don't let them." I folded the paper carefully, like it was something fragile and powerful, and I understood that the will reading wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fight.